to the class. Wish you all a very happy Balaram Purnima. We'll chant the one Darshan prayers. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militan Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupaha Kadamahyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahakarna Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadavaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Deva Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishnakandash Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatharine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gaurkashe Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Devi Pranamami Haripriye Manchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyev cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gauravakarenda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So today we'll complete the reading of Prabhupada book. Thank you everyone for being a part of this reading sessions. For those who are interested to read more about Srila Prabhupada, can go to vedabase.io, and on vedabase.io you have the book called Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, which is the original complete version of Prabhupada's life. What we read was an abridged version of that Lilamrita. So you can read these two volumes from here. Later on, I'll post the link in the group. And there are multiple other so many books about Srila Prabhupada which are available, which can be read. Right, so we'll continue reading the last chapter, the last few pages. As a loving tension can sometimes exist between the Supreme Lord and his pure devotee, so now a similar tension existed between Srila Prabhupada and his followers. Prior to his disciples' desperate petition at his bedside, Srila Prabhupada had seen his duty as instructing his disciples in how to die. Part of his mission was to set the perfect example in this most important lesson, how to pass life's ultimate test. But now his disciples were asking him to postpone the lesson in dying and stay with them indefinitely in the preaching field. And Prabhupada had agreed, showing that he had the ability to live if he chose, but sooner or later he would have to return to the a lesson of how a person should face the end of life. One special feature of Srila Prabhupada's activities is his relating intimately to the human condition, while at the same time remaining always aloof and transcendental. As a pure devotee, he was not subjected to the laws of karma, which awards reactions for pious and sinful deeds. He was not born by the force of karma, nor would he die by force of karma. As stated by Srila Rupa Goswami, one who's, are you not seeing the screen? I'm sorry. One who's uh, As a as stated by Srila Rupa Goswami, one whose body, mind, and words are fully engaged in devotional service to Lord Krishna is a liberated soul, even while living in this world. People often misunderstand the movements of a pure devotee within the material world, just as one on seeing clouds blowing past the moon may think the moon itself is moving. The Shastra therefore warns us never to see the Guru as an ordinary man subject to karma. But Srila Prabhupada, while always transcendental to this world, showed the conditioned souls how they too could come to the stage of liberation by constantly thinking about Krishna and serving him, so that at the time of death they could return to Krishna in the eternal spiritual world. And Prabhupada's lessons were always practical and universal. Srila Prabhupada's books, for example, were not mere theory, but were practical, full of realized knowledge. And Prabhupada practiced what he preached. His entire life was exemplary. He had been in family life, and even then he had vigorously preached by starting his Back to God magazine. In poverty and obscurity, he had struggled to start a spiritual movement. And by the grace of Krishna and his spiritual master, he had become successful. He had always shown by his human like attempts his willingness to bravely take on austerity and face danger. He had shown exemplary spiritual life for all to try and follow. He had gone alone in old age to a foreign country and had chanted Hare Krishna in a park in New York City, attracting the young men and women of America. Therefore, everyone should take his example and try to serve Krishna despite the immediate impediments. Srila Prabhupada encountered obstacles, yet by his free will and the help of Krishna, he surmounted them. This was his wonderful example. It is said that Lord Chaitanya, 500 years ago, made surrender to Krishna more attainable than Lord Krishna had 5,000 years ago. And now, in the 20th century, Srila Prabhupada has made Krishna consciousness possible for people all over the world. As part of his instruction and example, Srila Prabhupada knew he would have to show people just how to die. Srila Prabhupada knew he had escaped death a number of times by Krishna's grace, by the prayers of his disciples, and by his own pure and powerful will to propagate his movement. But from the signs given to him by Lord Krishna in 1977, Srila Prabhupada began decisively and conclusively ending his mission in the material world. And among his final duties was his giving complete guidelines on how to die. He was perfectly showing how to do that, which everyone has to do, but which is most difficult to do successfully, die. But a loving conflict was there. Prabhupada loved his disciples. He also knew they were not yet fully mature. His movement already had great potency and stature in the world, and yet it had many enemies. He was inclined to always protect his devotees, his movement, and all living entities, even the animals. So when his most intimate and faithful disciples pleaded that they could not go on without him, he had turned from showing how to die, agreeing to stay with them and preach. But at what point would they ever be willing to let him go? At what point could he say that the world of Maya and the enemies of Krishna were all gone? At what point would his disciples become fully mature? In following his decision to stay, Srila Prabhupada turned himself over to his disciples, allowing them to care for him completely. Those who took part recall that never before had Srila Prabhupada allowed such intimate dealings between himself and his disciples. The only thing comparable was in New York in 1966 when he had been very intimate in dealing with the first persons to join him, persons who had known nothing of the etiquette of approaching a spiritual master. But those who are present now and who had also been present then, said that these days were even more intimate. At one point, Kirtanananda firmly insisted that Srila Prabhupada drink a full cup of juice, even when he said he had had enough. Kirtanananda felt awkward, insisting, I'm not like Mother Yashoda that I can do this, he said. I keep remembering that you are my spiritual master. But Srila Prabhupada allowed himself to be ordered by Kirtanananda. Similarly, Bhavananda, Tamal Krishna, Bhakti Charu, Upendra, and other servants coaxed Srila Prabhupada to follow certain diets and cared for his body constantly. The other devotees were reminded of the story of Ishwar Puri, who gave intimate bodily service to his spiritual master, Madhavendra Puri, when Madhavendra was in the last stages of his life and apparently invalid. According to the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it was by his menial bodily service that Ishwar Puri proved his love for his spiritual master and was allowed to become the spiritual master of Lord Chaitanya. Srila Prabhupada had deferred the lessons in dying in favor of giving his disciples an unparalleled opportunity to serve him in pure and simple love. And he allowed this not only for a few, but for whoever came to Vrindavan. Many came, and all were allowed to enter Srila Prabhupada's room, massage his body, and sit with him as long as they liked, day and night, chanting the holy name for his pleasure. Srila Prabhupada also recommenced his translating, and this was done openly. Whereas previously he had always worked in solitude, he now encouraged all devotees to come, and as he lay in bed dictating his Bhaktivedanta purpose, a devotee would softly read the Sanskrit text to him while another held the microphone to his mouth, his voice sometimes barely audible. Srila Prabhupada would speak, awestruck. The disciples watched as their spiritual master worked. His thoughts were clear, he cited from memory references from various scriptures, and his philosophical exposition was rigorous. Prabhupada was giving himself completely and declaring it also, telling the devotees present, never leave me, and I cannot live without your company. They had asked him to stay, and he had agreed, consigning himself completely to their care. Those who were blessed to have this service felt themselves passing over all barriers of reluctance to serve, as well as all barriers of material desire. By intimately serving Srila Prabhupada, they felt the strength of complete surrender and sensed that this would sustain them always, even when Srila Prabhupada eventually did depart from the world. Prabhupada also continued speaking, as he had in recent months, about being unafraid of death and being fixed in transcendental knowledge. When receiving a presentation of some of his books recently printed in Portuguese by Hridayananda Goswami, Prabhupada encouraged him and said, this is life. The material world is just bones. The bones are not our real life. Our real concern is the living force. The bones may remain or go, it doesn't matter. The real life is sustaining the bones. There is even a history that there was a rishi who had only bones. So there is a science by which you can sustain life by only bones. Hiranyakashipu did it. You are also doing it, Srila Prabhupada, Tamakrishna said. So take care of the bones as long as possible, said Prabhupada. But the real life is here. Always remember that. The material world means we are simply all protecting bones and flesh together, but they have no knowledge of what they are. And when Atreya Rishi visited Prabhupada and asked that he visited Tehran, Prabhupada said that he was ready to go, but now you have to take a bundle of bones. These were, of course, the same things that Prabhupada had always taught, the same things that were in his books, but the lessons were more poignant and striking when Prabhupada applied them to his own situation. Yes, Anit Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. More than one devotee compared Prabhupada to Bhishma Dev, who gave important instructions in his last days. As Bhishma felt no pain and delivered learned and loving discourses even from his bed of arrows, and as Bhishma determined by his own free will the time of his departure from the world, so Srila Prabhupada spent his last days oblivious to his physical condition, defying death and instructing his spiritually innocent sons. But Prabhupada's sons could no longer stand by and simply hear the philosophical lessons. Prabhupada had accepted their affection when they had cried for him to stay with them. And now they wanted to express that expression in the only world they understood, a world which Srila Prabhupada living and talking with them, laughing or reprimanding them as he liked. They wanted him to eat and drink and become physically strong again. But again, Srila Prabhupada seemed to change and he began refusing food and drink. He had postponed his passing away to exchange lovingly with his disciples, and yet at the same time, by refusing to eat or drink, he was showing his preference for passing away. He admitted, when pressed, that it was an impossible course of action to live without food or drink, nor did he expect or want miracles. If he wanted to get better, it would be by taking nourishment. But for reasons of his own, he would not eat. He said recovery was material and he didn't want it. He kept closely in tune with the will of Krishna, allowing the holy name to sustain him. The doctors who had come there often puzzled, but those who were Vaishnavas understood and respected his prerogative. Prabhupada's servants made anxiety filled attempts to induce Prabhupada to take regular treatment, but Prabhupada preferred to take only Kirtan and Bhagavatam while at the same time sustaining a willingness to live. He emphasized with his disciples' anxiety and patiently explained the puzzling situation they were in. He wanted their care, and he allowed them to try to treat him, knowing that it was bringing them more and more into a surrender of love. But gradually it became more clear that Krishna's will was indicating Prabhupada's departure. Srila Prabhupada, Bhavananda coaxed, always working on the assumption that Prabhupada would stay if he wanted. Your presence on this planet is the only thing that's keeping the onslaught of Kali Yuga from really taking effect. We have no idea even what will happen if you leave. It's not in my hands, said Srila Prabhupada. Sorry. With perfect clarity of consciousness, Krishna Balram. Srila Prabhupada always spoke clearly, logically, and with complete devotion to Krishna. Up until the last, he dealt with practical matters, forming a Bhaktivedanta Swami charity trust for reconstructing ancient temples in Bengal and arranging final details regarding iskcon property and monies. Through all the dealings, he stayed always alert and he absorbed himself in Kirtan and Bhagavatam. It became obvious to his disciples that despite his promise, he was again moving inevitably towards giving the final lesson. He was teaching that love was beyond death, that a disciple's love could call the spiritual master back to the world to stay, and that a pure devotee has the ability to stay in the world beyond his allotted time. Meanwhile, however, he was progressing steadily to the final point. The devotees didn't feel angry with him or cheated that he was doing so. He had told them that he had free will given by Krishna, and they also, by their free will, had asked him to stay, and he had agreed. But they knew that he was not obliged. If, despite his prayers, Lord Krishna was telling Srila Prabhupada that he should come back to Godhead, what could they do but accept? If Srila Prabhupada was accepting, then they would accept also. Nothing, however, could change the fact that their surrendered love, it had now become a solid pact that could not be vanquished by any material changes. They had passed the test of eternal loving service, and that could not be taken away by death. Up until the end, there were interludes of sweetness as well as displays of Prabhupada's indomitable mood of fighting for Krishna. One day, Prabhupada's sister, Pishima, arrived unexpectedly and Prabhupada asked her to cook khichdi. At that time, Kirtananda was trying to put Prabhupada on the road to recovery by gradually increasing his liquids. And Kirtananda and other devotees opposed the idea of his suddenly eating solid foods. But Srila Prabhupada insisted, it doesn't matter whether what she cooks does good to me or bad, said Srila Prabhupada. She is a Vaishnavi. It will be good for me. He then began speaking in an extremely humble way. Probably I became a little puffed up because of my opulence and success, he said. Now God has shattered that pride. If you don't have your body, what is there to be puffed up about? Bhakti Charu protested, Srila Prabhupada, whatever you have done for Krishna. That may be, but in this world, unknowingly, you commit offenses. When Pishima heard this, she exclaimed, No, no, he never committed any offense. You cannot ever commit offenses, said Bhakti Charu. You are God's very dear one. How can you commit offenses? I am a little temperamental, said Srila Prabhupada. I used to use words like rascal and so on. I never compromised. They used to call it a club in one hand and a Bhagavatam in the other. That's how I preach. Anyway, make arrangements for my sister. There were also visits from Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers, and again Srila Prabhupada asked forgiveness for his offenses. One time, Nishkinchana Krishnadasa Babaji, Puri Maharaj, Ashram Maharaj, Ananda Prabhu, Purushottama Brahmachari, and about 20 others came and sat next to Prabhupada's bed. He was resting when they arrived, and they joined the kirtan till he awoke. When he saw them, he asked to be raised up. Sitting in the center of his bed with his godbrothers all around, he addressed them. All over the world, there is a beautiful field to preach Krishna consciousness, he said. I don't care whether I would be successful or not. People are willing to take. They are all taking also. If we preach together, the saying of Mahaprabhu, Prithvite, will come to true. We have everything. Spread the holy name, distribute prasadam. There is a beautiful field in Africa, in Russia, everywhere they are accepting. When Prabhupada began asking his god brothers to forgive him, they protested. You are the eternal leader, one of them asserted. You rule over us, guide us, and chastise us. Forgive all my offenses, Prabhupada repeated. I became proud of my opulence. No, Puri Maharaj, no, said Puri Maharaj. You never became proud. When you started preaching, opulence and success followed you. That was the blessing of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sri Krishna. There cannot be any question of you being offensive. When Srila Prabhupada presented himself as Mahapatit, greatly fallen, Puri Maharaj did not accept it. You have saved millions of people around the world, he said. Therefore, there is no question of offenses. But you should be called Mahapatit Pavana, the great savior of the fallen. Prabhupada's disciples regarded Prabhupada asking for his godbrother's forgiveness as a manifestation of his humility. But they were also puzzled. Certainly, Prabhupada's godbrothers were sincere in saying Prabhupada had committed no offense. Whatever he had done for Krishna. But Srila Prabhupada was also sincere in asking for forgiveness. That was the beautiful gem of his humility to ask everyone for forgiveness. For the purpose of preaching, displaying this gem had not always been the most effective way to spread the merciful teachings of Lord Krishna in every town and village. But now it could be displayed in London and now in Vrindavan. Prabhupada was showing his disciples extra affection and gratitude without reprimands, usually necessary in training disciples. This attitude of complete humility was a symptom of the highest stage of devotional life. Srila Prabhupada had explained in his books and in the Madhyama Adhikari, the second class devotee makes distinctions between the devotees, the innocent, non devotees, and the demons, whereas Mahabhagavata or the first class devotee sees everyone except himself as a servant of God. Sometimes, however, the Mahabhagavata desires to come down from the first class platform just to take up the most compassionate service of preaching Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada's disciples had all read of the Mahabhagavata stage in the scriptures, and now they were seeing it fully displayed as Prabhupada referred to himself as the most fallen and asked for everyone's forgiveness. Srila
Thank you,
Prabhupada,
Mastaji. Hare
Hare Krishna
Krishna.
Prabhuji, thank you.
Oh, Mataji, please continue.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Srila Prabhupada had heard of the program of his disciples, Loknath Swami, who was taking a small group of men on the bullock cart and preaching in villages throughout India. Loknath had told Srila Prabhupada how in course of their travels they had recently visited tirthas such as uh, Badarish, no, Bad-
Badrika Ashrama.
Badrik Ashram and Bhim Kapoor. Srila Prabhupada had enlivened to hear this, and he then evolved a transcendental desire to go himself on a cart pulled by bullocks to circumambulate the area of Vrindavan. Tamala Krishna and Bhavananda, who were serving Prabhupada with increased intimacy, felt themselves unable to support Srila Prabhupada in his desire, since they thought his fragile body could not survive such rough treatment on the roads. But Srila Prabhupada reasoned that dying in parikrama is glorious, and he said them and asked them to take him. A controversy developed among the devotees as some said Prabhupada's will to go on parikrama should be immediately honored as an order from the spiritual master. He wanted it, and he should be he should not be denied. The doctor, the doctor, however, assured them that Srila Prabhupada's body would not survive the jostling of the cart. The many devotees who crowded around Srila Prabhupada, Prabhuji, kindly just scroll up. Srila Prabhupada's bed held different opinions, and Prabhupada could see this. Following his request, however, Loknath went out and hired a cart with bullocks and prepared it for the ride. Loknath and himself Dutta suggested that the parikrama could go to the city of Vrindavana or visit the 7 main temples of the Goswamis. But then they said that since the next day of Govardhan Puja, Prabhupada could go to Govardhan Hills. Tamala Krishna, Bhavananda, and Bhakti Charu, however, protested adamantly against the parikrama. One day experiment, Prabhupada said. It is for one day. Rest assured, I will not die in one day. He liked the idea of going to Govardhan, and we shall make our cooking there, he said. Loknath Swami, he assured them, was experienced. Make very good picnic, he said. After discussing back and forth, the devotees finally decided that early next morning they would take Srila Prabhupada in a bullock cart to Govardhan. The majority of the devotees then left Srila Prabhupada alone for the night. Later that night, Srila Prabhupada received a visit from Nishkin, Nishkin Chana Krishna Dasa Babaji, who sat with Prabhupada, chanting and sometimes speaking in Bengali. Suddenly, Tamal Krishna and Bhavananda came to Prabhupada's bedside. They were in tears and besides themselves with anxiety. Prabhupada understood. You request me not to go? He asked. Well, Shirpad, said Tamal Krishna, I'll tell you, I am getting so upset sitting in the room upstairs. I was walking around. Two of the devotees told me that this road is so bad that if you go on this road, you are going to be jolted back and forth. The road is terrible. I just can't understand, Srila Prabhupada, why it has to be tomorrow and we have to go. Of anybody that wants you to travel, I do. But why do we have to go when you are in this condition? I can't understand it. Why are we throwing everything out of the window that we must go tomorrow? I can't understand. All right, said Srila Prabhupada softly, immediately agreeing to their proposal that he not go. Jaya Srila Prabhupada, said Bhakti Charu, who was also present. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada, said Bhavananda with great grief. All right, you are satisfied? Now I am, Srila Prabhupada, said Bhavananda. Yes, I was in too much anxiety. Never mind, I shall not put you in anxiety. Actually, Srila Prabhupada said, Tamal Krishna, we are so much attached to you that you practically drive us to madness sometimes. Tonight we were becoming mad. No, no, I shall not do that, said Prabhupada. Babaji Maharaj Prabhupada turned to Nishkinchana Krishnadasa Babaji and said, I see how much affection they have for me. Srila Prabhupada said, Srila Prabhupada said, Tamala Krishna, the way you deal the way you deal with us simply deepens our attachment every moment. It is my duty, said Prabhupada, and the devotees laughed warmly, understanding. Yes, they could understand. This was his duty. But all his actions and dealings, Prabhupada's intention was to capture spirit souls and deliver them to Krishna. His method of loving service, but he had not to do it for himself. He was delivering them to Krishna. That was his duty. On November 14th, 1977, at 7:30 p.m., in his room at Krishna Balram Mandir in Vrindavan, Srila gave his final instructions by leaving his mortal world and going back to Godhead. His departure was exemplary because his whole life was exemplary. His departure marked the completion of a lifetime of pure devotional service to Krishna. A few days before the end, Srila had said he was instructing as far as he could, and his secretary had added, You are the inspiration. Yes, Srila Prabhupada had replied, that I shall do until the last breathing. breathing. Prabhupada's last breathing was glorious, not because of any last minute mystical demonstration, but because Srila Prabhupada remained in perfect Krishna consciousness. Like grandfather Bhishma Deva, he remained completely collected and noble and grave, teaching until the end. He was preaching that life comes from life, not from matter, and he was showing that one should preach with every breath he has. The many devotees who crowded the large room bore witness that up to the very end, Prabhupada remained exactly the same. There was nothing suddenly incongruous with what he had. Kindly scroll up, Prabhuji. Previously shown and taught them. At the time of his departure, therefore, he was teaching how to die by always depending on Krishna. Prabhupada's passing away was peaceful. During the evening of November 14th, the Kaviraj asked him, is there anything you want? And Prabhupada replied faintly, Kuch ichha nahi. I have no desire. His passing away was in perfect situation in Vrindavan with devotees. A few months previously, a young girl, the daughter of one of Prabhupada's disciples, had passed away in Vrindavan. And when Srila Prabhupada had asked if she want, if she went back to Godhead to personally associate with Krishna, he had said, yes, anyone who leaves his body in Vrindavan is liberated.
Thank you, Mataji.
Hare
Yeah,
Krishna.
Mataji, please continue.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Dandavat Pranam. Of course, Vrindavan also means the state of pure Krishna consciousness. As Advait Acharya had said of Lord Chaitanya, wherever you are is Vrindavan. And this was also true of Srila Prabhupada. Had Srila Prabhupada passed away in London, New York, or Moscow, therefore, his destination would have been the same, as Lord Krishna states in the Bhagavad Gita. One who is always thinking of me, surely he attains to me. But because Vrindavan Dham is the quintessential realm of Krishna consciousness within the universe, the ideal place for departure from this world, so it was yet another exemplary feature of Srila Prabhupada's life that he went back to Godhead with Vrindavan as his last junction. Those Vaishnavas who had taken the vow never to leave Vrindavan could see that Srila Prabhupada, after sacrificing everything, including the benefit of residing in Vrindavan, to deliver fallen souls in the most God-forsaken locations of the world, had returned to the holy land of Vrindavan and from there had departed for the original abode of Lord Krishna in the spiritual sky. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, anyone who executes service in Vrindavan certainly goes back to home, back to Godhead after giving up his body. Srila Prabhupada's departure was also perfect because he was chanting and hearing the holy names of God. Thus, the Supreme Personality of Godhead was present at Srila Prabhupada's passing, just as he was at the celebrated passing away of Bhishmadev, who said, despite his being equally kind to everyone, he has graciously come before me while I am ending my life, for I am his unflinching servitor. As Lord Krishna came before Bhishma Dev, assuring him and everyone else that Bhishma was returning back to Godhead on leaving his body, so the Lord in his incarnation of Nama Avatara, the Hare Krishna mantra, was present for Srila Prabhupada's departure. Prabhuji, could you please roll? Srila Prabhupada's life had been dedicated to spreading the holy name to every town and village, and for a month he had been surrounding himself with the holy name. For his passing away, he specially wanted to fill the room with devotees chanting Hare Krishna, and Krishna fulfilled that wish. Srila Prabhupada therefore departed under the most favorable circumstances possible in the most sacred place, Vrindavan, and surrounded by Vaishnavas chanting the holy name. An ideal spiritual teacher, Acharya, always acts in such a way that others may follow his example. As Srimad Bhagavatam states, these great souls who cross over the ocean of birth and death by taking shelter of the boat of the lotus feet of Krishna miraculously leave the boat on this side for others to use. And Srila Prabhupada's disappearance, by its perfect example, affords all conditioned souls the means for meeting the greatest of all dangers. An auspicious death is not merely a matter of psychological adjustment, so that one may die without regret or without becoming unduly upset. The real point is that at the time of death, the soul must leave the body and take his next birth. Only the Krishna conscious soul can leave this world of birth and death and attain an eternal blissful life in the spiritual world. Therefore, one's life is tested at death. Death means the soul cannot stand to live in the body anymore. Whatever the material cause may be, the situation has become unbearable for the soul, and leaving the body causes great distress. The Shastras therefore advise us to get free from the cycle of repeated birth and death. Meeting an inauspicious death and being dragged down to a lower birth is the most fearful thing for the living being. So fearful is it that we may try to ignore death altogether. Death is painful because the eternal spirit soul is placed in a most unnatural situation. Although he is eternal and should not have to die, he is forced to die because of his connection with the material body. At death, the eternal soul is forced to leave the body for a destination he knows not. Thus, he is full of fear and suffering. The pain and fear is usually overwhelming, and one thinks only of material attachments or bodily pain. Therefore, King Kulashekara prayed, and Prabhupada often quoted, "Please let me pass away not in some prolonged contemplation of my bodily death, but just while I am chanting Hare Krishna. If I can meditate on you and then pass from this body, that will be perfection." Over the last months of his life in this world, Srila Prabhupada taught how it is possible to meet death step by step in Krishna consciousness. In his last days, he told one of his sannyasis, "Don't think this isn't going to happen to you." Prabhupada came into this world on Krishna's request to teach us how to live a pure life of Krishna consciousness, and that includes how to finally pass away from this world to attain eternal life. Prabhupada underwent death in a way that was perfect and glorious, and at the same time in a way which we can all follow. When we have to go, we can cling to the memory of how a great soul left his body, always thinking of Krishna, surrounding himself with the medicine of chanting Hare Krishna, always desiring to hear about Krishna and practicing detachment from the misery of the material condition. This last lesson was one of the most wonderful and important instructions of Srila Prabhupada gave us. He taught by his life, by his books, and at the end by his dying. Education in how to die is meant specially for the human being. An animal dies and a human being also dies, but a human being is supposed to understand the process of going back to the spiritual world at the time of death. Remaining always fixed and undisturbed in Krishna consciousness, Srila Prabhupada expertly taught the process. His passing away, therefore, was a perfect lesson and one that can be faithfully followed. While there was nothing lamentable for Srila Prabhupada in his departing from the world and going back to Godhead, it was certainly lamentable for his followers and for the people of the whole world, who became bereft of the presence of their greatest well-wisher and benefactor. Srila Prabhupada had written in a Srimad Bhagavatam purport, when the mortal body of the spiritual master expires, the disciple should cry exactly like the queen cries when the king leaves his body. At the departure of his own spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada had written, "On that day, O my master, I made a cry of..." Prabhuji, could you please? "I made a cry of grief. I was not able to tolerate the absence of you, my Guru." And so on November 14, 1977, as the powerful news spread around the world, those who knew and loved Srila Prabhupada were gripped by a fearful, unrestricted grief. They saw everything around them in the overwhelming atmosphere of separation from Srila Prabhupada. They turned for solace to Srila Prabhupada's books. However, the disciples and the spiritual master are never separated because the spiritual master always keeps company with the disciple as long as the disciple follows the instructions of the spiritual master. This is called the association of Vani. Physical presence is called Vapu. As long as the spiritual master is physically present, the disciple should serve the physical body of the spiritual master. And when the spiritual master is no longer physically existing, the disciple should serve the instructions of the spiritual master. Srila Prabhupada's disciples were already carrying out his instructions, but now they would have to do so without the Vapu, without the opportunity of regularly seeing and being with him. At first, this was very difficult for them to face, but those who were sincere soon realized that Srila Prabhupada had, upon his departure, given them the greatest gift of all, service in separation.
Thank you,
Service in
Mataji. Pushpatana Mataji.
Pranam Guruji. Service in separation is the highest realization and ecstasy. This was the teaching of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in regard to Lord Krishna and his foremost devotees, the gopis of Vrindavana. When Krishna left his beloved gopis and went to Mathura, never to return to them in Vrindavan, the gopis and all the other residents of Vrindavana wept piteously in separation. They so much loved Krishna and they could not live without him. And to maintain their life, they began to constantly remember and discuss his name, fame, form, and entourage. By constantly remembering him in love and by the anticipating his return to Vrindavan, they achieved an ecstasy of union in separation, which Gaudiya Vaishnava scholars declare to be superior even to the ecstasy the gopis felt in Krishna's presence. Because Krishna is absolute, even remembering him or chanting his name puts the devotees into direct contact with him. But because there is stimulatory, a feeling of separation from him, there is an added dimensions of inconceivable stimulation or union and separation. This is the epitome of Krishna conscious realization. Prabhupada's followers knew his principle of service in separation, technically known as Vipralamba Seva, but to most devotees it was theoretical realization. Before one can feel intense, loving separation from Krishna, one must feel first intense attraction to him. But for the conditioned soul who has forgotten and abandoned Krishna and has come to the material world under the spell of Maya illusion for him, separation from Krishna is based on complete ignorance and forgetfulness. In coming to spiritual life, a neophyte first begin to awaken to very existence of God. As he overcome aesthetic misconception, next he come gradually through practice to take a relationship of service to Krishna. Through serving the spiritual master, intense love of Krishna in separation is the most advanced stage and cannot possibly be realized in full by neophytes. Thus, service in separation had remained in theoretical teaching to many of Prabhupada's followers. But when Srila Prabhupada departed from the world and felt his disciple to carry on his mission, they immediately realized union with him in separation. He was gone, but he was still very much present. The realization of a pretension or a myth or was in sentimental psychic phenomena, telepathic communication with the dead, or so on. It was a completely substantive, practical, palpable reality, a fact of life. Srila Prabhupada had given them personal service and how they would continue that service. Prabhupada was still present through his instructions and all the nectar of his direct association, all the nectar of Krishna consciousness, and he had given and shared with them was still available. Service in separation for Prabhupada's disciple was undoubtedly a fact. Otherwise, now that they were without his personal presence, how were they able to sustain themselves in spiritual life? The fact that they could continue as before increased their feeling of devotion and even increased their serving capacity, meant that Srila Prabhupada was very much still with them. As a Srila Prabhupada's last instruction was the lesson of how a human being should die, he now taught beyond dying how to practically implement it, the highest philosophical teaching of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. This realization gave devotees great hope that Srila Prabhupada and the revolutionary life of Krishna consciousness he had brought with him were not finished upon his departure. Often, when a great personality dies, his contribution collapsed, but Srila Prabhupada presence remained and expanded. Sustaining his devotees' lives, he was still in charge. Thank you. Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. So we end it here. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.